Alright, what I've got here today is this game called Harbour. And in the background of it, I have this big box of a game called Le Havre. And the reason I have this game in the background is because this game is basically has a lot of the same mechanics of Le Havre in it, and it's done in a sort of a small package that's supposed to take between 30 and 60 minutes. And the designer, Scott Alms, is the designer who has done Tiny Epic Kingdoms and those games, those Tiny Epic games. So I'm not really going to go through too much on the rules because Rado has once again done a run through on this game, and I recently just picked this up, thinking because this game here this is an excellent game. Le Havre is an excellent game, and I really like it. There are a few flaws with the game Le Havre, but overall it's one of my favorite Uwe Rosenberg games. And I've enjoyed it, gotten a lot of enjoyment out of it, so I figure, hey, if I can get a version of this in a small package that can play in 30 to 60 minutes, that would be excellent. So I picked it up. And what we've got here is, down here, kind of a basic setup for the game. Here, let me straighten the camera out a little bit here. I just set it up for 2 players. And everything's all kind of scrunched together, just kind of stay on the screen. But anyways, the game has a bunch of buildings put out just like you would see in Le Havre that you can buy. It's got a market of goods kind of condensed onto this one board here, and with some values of $2, $3, $4, and $5 dollars, and amounts that you need to trade them. Everybody's got their own little sort of home base with a character who gives you some special powers. They're different as for what they can do. You can also use this card to construct the buildings like you would in Le Havre. And they each have a little special power that goes with them, and there's a whole entire stack of these, which, oops, that's the generic side. There's always a generic side in the back, and an entire stack with all these powers, which at first glance seems really cool. Who wouldn't want a big giant stack of cards with all these powers on them? They also vary with the symbols that are on them, and these symbols have special things, benefits that they give you when you have cards with them in front of you when you're playing. Now, the board game Le Havre also would have a setup of cards out, building cards that you can buy, and the similarities here are strikingly similar. Most cards have a symbol on them that has that's kind of a special. Sometimes it's a special ability. Let's say like this one, the fisherman symbol is a bit of a. It's not a special ability, but it gives you a benefit when you have a lot of fishermen. There are certain buildings that, for example, this one here gives you 1 fish per fisherman symbol that you have on cards in front of you. So if you have this card, you're going to get a fish on your turn. And if you own this card too, that would give you 2 symbols if you had these fisherman symbols on them. And the different symbols on the cards can give you a little bit of different bonuses, which is sort of like what these symbols, I think, are somewhat trying to emulate in the game. These symbols give you sort of those same types of abilities in some ways. They're a little different. Some of them do a little bit different stuff. So in this game, Tiny Epic Kingdoms, you're buying buildings, and you have a market that you're building up goods in a market like you would in Le Havre, and then you're constructing the buildings using this moving here, and you're moving around to take actions on these buildings. You're going to buy buildings in front of you and such. very similar to Le Havre. Yeah, that's sort of the essence of Le Havre, distilled down into this game, the sort of buying of buildings, using buildings for their abilities. You can see on here there's some iconography that tells you what you can do. You can use any goods of any type here, and you can get one good of the same type per warehouse. So you get a good and a good per type of warehouse that you have here with that card. And all these cards have different abilities. This one here gives you a cattle for each anchor symbol that you have, which is sort of similar to this card where you get a fish per fisherman symbol that you have. So the cards give you those abilities, and you can move them just like in Le Havre too. You have one marker that moves around in Le Havre, and you're taking one action in turn. And that's one of the things that I liked about the game Le Havre a lot, is that you're taking one action, then your turn's over, the next person takes an action. So it has this like a nice flow to the game where the turns are quick, and as people are doing their turn, you're kind of figuring out what you want to do, and oftentimes when it comes back to you, you sort of know what you want to do, and you just take your turn quickly, and the game flows pretty smoothly that way. That's one of the things I liked about Le Havre, and this game sort of has that flow too, where you're taking moving to a building, doing the action, moving to another building and doing an action or whatever, and taking your turns. So, I mean, that sounds all great and stuff, and being similar to Le Havre, I was very excited about playing the game, and then after getting into the game, I found that I wasn't really particularly happy with it, and I'll kind of explain to you why I wasn't very happy to it. And it's not because I was really totally expecting this game to be as good as Le Havre, and is it really even a fair comparison? Le Havre is a pretty long game. It's got a lot to it. There's a lot of components. There's a lot of things in it that you can do. Let's see, I don't know what the time is on Le Havre. It's 100 to 200 minutes versus 30 to 60. No, 30 to 60 minutes for this game. So that's a pretty big difference in time. So I wasn't really expecting this game to compare to Le Havre. However, because the mechanics are so similar, Le Havre is sort of the baseline for it. Alright, but so let me get into sort of why I was disappointed with this game. First of all, right off the bat, I know a lot of people have talked about the artwork and how they love the artwork. I was not a fan of the artwork. Even though I like the pictures, I think the pictures are excellent, I did not think that this really kind of strange fantasy theme, with the green goblins and these strange people, gnomes, whatever, all these sort of fantasy creatures are doing all of these jobs, and all they're doing is working on a pier. I guess to me that there was a disconnect. I mean, that didn't seem like that the fantasy setting had anything to do with the game itself. All it is kind of it's a harbor, working harbor. I would much have rather preferred them to have stuck to just realistic pictures of things that people do in the harbor. So this kind of the artwork, even though it's good quality, I didn't think fit the game. But putting that aside, that if the game is good, I can get over the artwork type of thing. That wouldn't bother me as much if I had liked the game more. There are two main things that I did not like about the game. The first one is this market here. When you sell goods to get money, you're going to be selling goods to get money, and probably several goods to get money to buy these cards. that's all great. You're building up your market here. You know, for example, I can get up to 5 fish, or I only need 4 fish, and then I can sell the fish and get $4 towards a card here to buy. That's all great. What happens is after you sell those things, the market recalibrates itself and the goods reorder themselves. That in itself is fine. It's a clever way to represent the supply and demand in the game. Problem I ran into though is there's a ton of cards in here, like this privateer ship is one of them, that allow you on your turn to change the order of the things in the market. And you get the privateer. There's another one in here, I know for sure. Where is it? It's even worse than this one here. The House of Weights and Standards allows you to rearrange the markers as you please in the market. Okay, so the reason I don't like that is because instead of being able to build up and do some kind of planning with what you've got, people are constantly manipulating this market and rearranging things, and it becomes a game of manipulating the market rather than focusing on and taking advantage of the cards. At least from my opinion, when those cards come out. Right? Now you could probably say, oh well, just take those cards out of the game. I guess you could, but that annoys me a little bit. You've designed the game and you put them in there, so they're part of the game for a reason. And I guess I could just take them out of the game, but this is part of the purpose of the game, was to include these and have that focus of manipulating this market. Did not like that at all. And I was really kind of bothered by that. It just introduced too much chaos. Here's another one. Swap 2 market markers. So there's a lot of these cards in here. Bank. Shift a market marker to the lowest and bump the others up accordingly. So it's more than just taking out a couple of cards. There's a whole bunch of them in here. And it takes away... So you're designing a game about Le Havre, which is really about these cards, and then putting in this mechanic that I think totally takes away from the card play and puts the focus square on, I just need to collect some goods and then manipulate this and I can get what I want. And nothing else really matters. Type of thing. And I didn't like that at all. So the artwork, the market, and there's one other thing that I didn't like about the game was, and I couldn't really figure out why, because, well, I wasn't really taken in by the powers in the game. Almost all of the powers allow you to do something with one good to get something of another good. And, some of them even have, well, a few other things on them. Not all of them are like that, but most of them are you do something with one good and then you get or do something with another good. And that's mostly what most of these cards are about. And you can say, well, yeah, doesn't the cards in Le Havre, isn't that really kind of what they're all about? Yeah, it's true. And so when I was thinking about why I didn't like it in this game and I didn't mind it in this game, I got the Le Havre cards out and I was kind of looking at them. Oh hey, yeah, this is like, take, I think this is, you can buy 4 grains. Oh jeez, I can't remember what this card's supposed to do. 4 times you can, I think maybe you can sell a grain for $2. I can't remember what some of these cards do. This one you can trade an iron, 15 energy, and get 2 steels, things like that. So you're trading goods for money. And that's essentially what you're doing here when you use the market, is you're trading goods for money, and then using the money to immediately buy a building, so the money isn't really necessarily changing hands. In the Harbour, you actually get the money in your hands. Sounds good. But I was like asking myself, okay, well, these cards are all the same. Why is it has such a different and better feel in the Harv than in this game where the good, you're just exchanging goods too. And I thought about that, and then I kind of realized this, that the big difference in why this game falls so short of Le Havre is that when in Le Havre you are collecting goods, but you're not just immediately cashing those goods in for something, you're often transforming those goods into other forms. You're transforming, for example, clay into bricks. You're transforming coal into coke, energy, and then you've got to use that energy in combination with iron, which combining them in another building to make steel. So there's a process of collecting the goods and manipulating the goods themselves that this game completely lacks. And that is the real core of Le Havre and a lot of Eurogamer games, is that sort of manipulation of the goods. It's really not that fun just to collect the goods themselves. I mean, you don't need 4 different types of goods if all you're doing is just collecting goods and then trading the goods in for something else. And really, essentially, all the goods, the only thing that differentiates the goods is the value of them in the market. There's nothing else that differentiates these goods in the game at all. It's just the value of what they are in the market. So they're all essentially the same. That extra step of manipulating the goods and then being able to do different things. You can take the regular raw good, and it has a certain value for certain things, and you can upgrade the good into something else. Like you can upgrade the fish into smoked fish, and then the smoked fish can be transformed into money with some of these buildings, or it can be shipped out and sold for money as well. It can also be used to feed your workers. So there's a lot more depth to what you can do with the goods in Le Havre that is completely missing in this game. So even though it looks like this game is distilled down mechanically, it really barely scratches the surface of what the game Le Havre is really about and how it really works mechanically, I think. So what you're left with is all of this exchanging of goods and all of these special different ways to exchange goods on these cards come out rather bland in the end, because you're really all just doing the same action. Some cards give you certain amounts of changing goods around than other cards. And then once it's changed around, it just gets transferred and sold in the market to immediately buy a card. I mean, in theory, that level of abstraction might be able to work, but it really doesn't come off very well in this game. Despite having all of these cool cards, they're really not all that different either. They're all kind of like, okay, I get a good one type of good and another. I have one sort of very minimal type of ability I can do with a card, and I would rather probably have seen fewer cards with more interesting things that maybe could be done with them. I was sad that I didn't like the game, even though I really wanted to.